Welcome to the chapter that covers Strategic Human Resource Management, HRM. So we will be looking at the human capital component of an organization, so all the people that makes the place. So what we're looking at here, this is a technical field. There's a lot of policies, procedures, compliance, legalities that inform us in terms of how we can actually manage, enable, and make sure our talent is doing what they're supposed to be doing, as well as growing within the organizations. So we will be looking at the scope as well as the changing role of strategic HRM. So we are moving from, or we have moved, organizations have moved from a very sort of paper pushing administrative function to being more strategic and informing big decisions in terms of how we acquire other corporations, how we do layoffs, those more strategic challenges that we might have. Understanding key elements in the war for talent, making sure we attract and retain the best people. And that is how we actually do selection and placement, right? So how do we hire people? Do our processes for selection and placement, are they effective and successful? Pay structure and pay for performance. So compensation is one of the most tangible things that organizations do because every employee sees a paycheck. So what does that look like? Then we have something called a high performance work system that we'll talk about, which means that all of the pieces together come together for the great puzzle. And then at the end, we are talking about the balanced scorecard. So the planning, organizing, leading, and controlling framework keeps recurring throughout this textbook. And we see that Strat HR is in the controlling category here. All right, so we get Strat HR over here, which means that we want to make sure that people are actually meeting the standards over and beyond that we have set for them in terms of their performance. Something to point out is that because we are now having a more strategic view of HR, it's not just the HR department's function and responsibility to make sure that human capital is managed as well as it possibly can be, but it's everybody within the organization. So every manager, line manager, middle manager, all the way up to the top need to take on a responsibility for the people in the organizations. And if we do that, then we will be more competitive. Then we can compete in the marketplace to make sure that we are profitable as an organization. And so to make all of this happen, we need to have an organizational level view. So we cannot just be a department sitting in a unit somewhere in the organization, but it needs to be at the top level of the organization. So left side of the screen right here talks about what are the requirements. So what are the things that are going to make us successful as an organization when it comes to human capital? I already mentioned some of the keywords, right? So we have to attract the right employees to the company. So in order to be able to do that, we need to understand what kind of an employee we want to hire. Not every organization will be looking for the same employees. There's different knowledge, skills, and abilities that your employees would need as compared to employees of another organization. And so when we are out there recruiting people, we need to make sure we attract the right people. A lot of managers and CEOs will say that the most important decision that we have is how do we actually attract, recruit, and select, meaning hire. How do we hire the right people? And hiring is the most crucial thing we do in organizations, because if you end up with very bad hires, what is tomorrow going to look like for you? Not a good place to be. So we want to make sure we attract the right employees. Then we want to make sure we have metrics. So we measure their performance so that they're actually contributing to the strategy of the organization, meaning they're doing things that will move the organizations forward today. And then we reward them. We keep them happy through salaries, wages, and benefits so that they will stay engaged and motivated. And if we have all of these pieces, and there's more to it, but this is the broad overview. If we have all of these pieces, we will have a high-performing work system, right? And again, I don't have a pen here. I'm doing this with one trackpad, so it's not going to be as pretty. But we talk about high performance work systems, which means the entire system of policies, processes, procedures that manage our talent come together in that big puzzle. And it's an HPWS, high performing work system. So we can define human capital over here as, let's go with that one, right? So a company's human capital asset is the collective sum of attributes, life experiences, knowledge, inventiveness, energy, and enthusiasm that its people choose to invest in their work. So it's everything that employees bring to an organization and contribute to that organization. You can't just bring it, but you have to contribute it as well. Invest it at work. That entails human capital. So everything a person brings to the job and uses over there. I mentioned in the intro that HR today is a strategic partner. We are not just a unit that's administrative, that is pushing papers and checking boxes, but we are sitting at the big decision table, making decisions about how the human capital can be deployed for the company to be successful. We want to make sure that we have the best employees that are going to take us there. So we do know from research that companies that value their employees, that put a lot of value on them in terms of how they are treated, how they are compensated, they are more profitable than those who do not do that, that use the churn technique. We don't care about employees, and if you leave, we're just going to hire somebody new. Those companies are clearly not going to be as successful. We already talked about the fact that everybody needs to be on board. Everybody needs to understand and work toward the fact that people are important. We have seen accounting profits increase when we are doing the right things for our employees. Accounting profits increase, shareholder value also will increase when that happens. But for all of this to actually happen, HR, meaning the unit or the department, will need to focus on results, not simple metrics. So it is very difficult to actually measure performance. Think of the job you're in, the job of your family members, friends, the job that they do in a paid work setting. How do we actually measure that? And how do we know when the performance is good performance or below standard performance or it exceeds? How do you know that? How do you measure that? What is the actual metric? So measuring performance is difficult. So we want to make sure that we actually answer big questions. What are the big questions? So for instance, one of the things that HR has been doing over the years, obviously, is to train. We train our employees to make sure they can do their job. So a simple metric would be something like, in the year prior to this year, so last year, we trained 43% of the workforce, and they had an average of 12 days of training per year. That's great, right? 43% were trained. They were in some type of training environment for 12 days out of the work days out of that year. What does that really mean, right? What is the result of that? Well, the result of that is that now they are customer service agents and they are able to answer customer questions within 1 minute, and it used to take 7 minutes. Oh, wow. Well, that's much better, and that's much more understandable for the CEO and the executive team than just saying 43% were trained. So we have to make sure that we can answer questions that are relevant to the company and not just use simple metrics that are pointless and don't tell us anything. So strategic HR management practices should answer the following key questions. So here are some guidelines that we can use to see whether we are adding strategic value to the organization. Competencies. To what extent do our employees have the required knowledge, skills, and abilities to implement strategy? So KSA, knowledge, skills, and abilities, is a terminology that you will see in the human capital field quite a bit. Sometimes we add an O at the end, knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics. And that's basically the entirety of what that person should be able to do their job. And we need to have the knowledge, skills, and abilities so we can implement strategy, meaning make the organization successful. Second one is consequence. To what extent does our company have the right measures, rewards, and incentives in place to align people's efforts with company strategy? So the extent to which we're actually making sure that we're measuring performance, as I talked about on the prior slide, right? How do you do that? And when we actually have people that meet that standard or exceed it, how do you reward them? What are the incentives that we have in place so that people will work towards that strategy? Thirdly is governance. To what extent does our company have the right structures, communication systems, and policies to create a high-performing work organization, right? HPWS that we talked about on the prior slides. So we need to make sure we have the systems in place, the right organizational structure, communications, what kind of policies, are they broad, are they specific? Do we leave decision-making power to the employees? What kind of governance do we have in place to make sure that we can be successful? And the fourth and last one is learning and leadership. To what extent can our company respond to uncertainty and learn to adapt to change quickly? So the environment today is much more dynamic than it was 50 or 100 years ago. So we have to make sure that we take in knowledge and information, evaluate it to see the extent to which it actually matters and means something and can help us as an organization. And then we need to execute on it. So we get in new information, but that doesn't mean anything unless we do something differently tomorrow. And that is what learning essentially is. It's we're changing behaviors. So we want to make sure that we learn and that our leadership is focused on that. And within the organization, top to bottom, everybody has that mindset. So when we look at the actual functions of an organization, on the left side here, these four very broad, very big categories are some of the essential functions for organizations today. They're not the only ones, but these are four of the big ones. So beyond the need for compliance with HR rules and regulations, we have these four key elements that we can focus on. Firstly, selection and placement. So hiring is one of the most important things an organizations will do. So it's definitely a critical HR task. When we hire, we want to make sure we have the technical competencies, meaning can they actually do the job for which we are hiring them? So if you're hiring somebody to be a graphic designer, are they technically competent? Can they produce images and visuals that they would have to do in the graphical design sphere? And we also need them to have behavioral competencies. Can they actually work with the team? Can they work with their manager? They might have to work with clients to get the jobs from the clients. So behaviorally, are they competent? And we also have soft things such as organizational culture. Do they fit in within our organization? Do they understand the norms and do they work well and flourish within our company? So it's not just about the job, it's all of the other things that we need them to be able to do to make sure that they are successful for the company. Then we have job design. This is really what are the tasks, activities, projects, etc. that are entailed in the task that they, or in the job, that they are hired to do. So job design then is the process of putting that together. So what tasks or activities, etc. should go into that job. So job design is the process of putting together various elements to form a job. And how do we do that? Well, it depends, right? So different companies have different types of jobs. Some jobs are going to be very specific. You're going to do one task or couple of tasks. You're very specialized. Remember, we call that job specialization from Hertzberg. And some other companies are going to have very broad job descriptions where you do a lot of things, but maybe not as much. And so it really going to come down to what the organization needs. So we have organizational requirements. What does the organization need employees to do to be successful? We also look at the workers that we have. Do they have the competencies, to have the knowledge? Do they have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to execute the job in the way that we have designed it? And absolutely, we have to pay attention to people's health, safety, and ergonomics so that their physical body is not being strained or stressed in the physical environment that they are working. Compensation and rewards. We're going to talk more about that later in the chapter, but do we have high base salaries? Do we have low base salaries? Do we give people incentives or rewards? Stock options. There's a lot of different ways we can choose to compensate and reward our employees. So these are big decisions for the organizations because compensations and rewards is a big line item for a company in terms of their balance sheets. And also, this is one of the things that people see when they're attracted to a company. How much pay and benefits do I get? Something that's a little bit more recent in the development of HRM is diversity management, as well as diversity and inclusion. So it's not that we are hiring certain categories or certain ages or certain genders, but it's more about being open and accepting to everyone and making sure that everybody can feel included. So once we have hired people, a diverse population, do we also make them feel welcome? So it's one thing to have diversity, but if we don't make them feel welcome, we're not inclusive, then it's a moot point. People are just going to leave the company. And there's a lot of companies that do that. They hire on diversity, they check the boxes, but then they fail to actually say, hey, we really value you and appreciate your viewpoint. Come hang out with us and contribute to our tasks and projects. Instead, people get the cold shoulder, and of course, people are going to leave. So we have to be both diverse as well as inclusive. And we do know that when we have complementary skills, when we complement each other, we are all better off. So that's going to wrap this portion of the Strat HRM chapter, and I'll see you around for the next one. Thanks.